Hello and welcome. I'm Julie Fogel, the Marketing Director at CuriWorks, and I'll be your host for today's webinar, Producing Consistently Accurate Correspondence with Reliable Data. As you know, letter generation is an essential part of the Appeals and Grievances process, and our goal today is to show you how utilizing customizable templates and automation ensures your A&G staff can produce timely documents as well as complete case reports easily and accurately. Before I introduce today's presenters, I do have a few housekeeping items. We have muted the attendees' microphones, but we certainly want to make sure you're able to engage with us. So please utilize the chat box feature or the question feature to drop questions you may have or share struggles and experiences with us, and we'll be monitoring these throughout the session. We are recording today's webinar, and we'll be sharing a link to the session for you to revisit or share with colleagues. Now it is my pleasure to introduce today's speakers. Ian Waiton is an account executive at CuriWorks. He spent the past 5 years on the services side of the house and brings both his implementation experience and thoughtful approach to problem solving to his role on the sales team. Speaking of problem solvers, Dan Smith also joins us today. For the past 6 years, Dan served as CuriWorks Senior Sales Engineer, putting to use his more than 17 years of experience implementing OnBase and CuriWorks solutions in the payer-provider space. Let's get started.
Thank you, Julie. Pleasure to talk to everyone today. I think I know why you're here, but I want to make sure and confirm those points with you. We are presenting this for those of you who are at your positions, looking at all of the different types of letters that you have to produce, all the different types of documentation you have to produce, and trying to emphasize ways to you that you can get this job done easier and you can do this in a more efficient way. So if you're manually performing these actions of writing letters, creating content for your members and sending it out to them, you're in the right spot. Other reasons we expect you to consider what you should get out of this is, are you in positions where you are creating carbon copy letters for representatives, legal representation of some of your members, and you have to manage actually getting those carbon copies out, or are you possibly forgetting those letters in the first place? Perhaps you are using templates for your letters, and managing those in a directory may or may not be working out well for you. Hope to teach you some ways on how it can be automated, the selection of these templates within our solution, so you're not having to flip through a directory to complete that. Depending on the types of letters, all the different formats that you're having to deal with, do you find out that you're wasting time or spending a lot of time at least formatting, changing the layouts for these letters for all the different types that you have to submit and send out to your members? If you're in the situation where you have to translate any letters for some of your members, and you know that they have a preferred language, hope to instruct you on ways that you can complete these actions efficiently and focus more on the review stages. And then finally, I know it's a little separate, a little different than the actual letter creation, but when we need to create packets of information to send out to an external party for level 2, 3, and 4 cases, show you ways that you can save time, simplify how you collect all those different documents for that submission. So if any of these points relate to you, you're in the right spot. And to sum up how to plan for your correspondence, what we're gonna try to narrow all these topics down to 3 different categories. Pretty much create and manage those templates if you aren't today. Making sure we can provide or produce some sort of logic to pick the right template at the right time in the process based on the situation you find your appeals and grievance case in. And finally, again, collecting, collating all the different documents so that you have one item, one attachment that you can send to an IRE or IRO. So we're gonna take a second, we're gonna go back in time, and I promise this will relate to our templates here. But I got a question for Dan. Dan, what invention what efficient modern invention came out in 1978 that you think relates to our presentation today?
Put me on the spot there. First thing that comes to mind is the pneumatic nail gun.
No, not at all. Maybe this will help. If we can get in the mood of what happened in 1978, popular fashion included bell-bottom jeans, lots of facial hair of all types, discos, and PGA major wins. Feels like it was just yesterday that the 70s were around. So in 1978, an application called WordStar debuted, a function within WordStar that allowed you to create a mail merge. So this is 44 years ago. A predecessor to Microsoft Word that we use today came out with this function. And I'm here to tell you that it is still cutting edge and it is still widely useful or widely used. And if you aren't utilizing this technology, and it's been 4 decades, I think it's a good time to jump on the bandwagon. Because when you look at your appeals and grievance process and you're producing these letters, in the middle of that process, a perfect situation would include an acknowledgement letter and a decision letter. But in reality, you have a lot more letters that you need to produce than just the acknowledgement and decision letter. And every situation that could come up with a certain particular case, depending on which turn it might take, could require these additional letters, carbon copies to these additional letters. So it's a lot to manage, and you don't know what situation you're going to get in with each case that comes through. And rumor has it that CMS will soon be requiring birthday and Valentine's Day cards to your members. So how do we create and manage templates? Well, if you are doing this manually today, what you might find yourselves getting into is trying to manage the different letterheads. If you are producing letters for certain plans and they have particular needs for their letter types, thinking about what letters have already been approved, if there is an approval process that legal runs through to make sure that the letter includes everything that they need to for second level appeals, for instance. You want to make sure that that's the template that's used by your team. And then also, again, the multiple language situation, if you're having to translate each letter one at a time manually, then we're going to show you ways to help out with these types of situations you may find yourselves in. And of course, what are you wasting? Of course, lots of time. You're running the risk of having the mistakes within your letters, translation errors, and using the wrong template altogether. So I'm going to turn over to Dan for a quick presentation of using that mail merge technology and how we're applying it to our letter creation.
Yeah, so this is our case container. So all the values that we're capturing, the member provider, all that good detail is all right here within our case. We take those values and then we use that pneumatic nail gun to bam, automatically attach those values directly to the generated letter. Quick fun fact, the nail gun was actually invented in 1950, not 1978. I was totally wrong. But GPS, Global Positioning Systems, was invented in 1978 also alongside WordStar. Yeah, but once we get that data into our system, we could apply it and generate these documents. Easy as that. Once it's all correct in there, we can click accept and that will be saved to this member's profile.
Awesome. Never gets old how amazing this technology is. Also part of this scenario where we're creating letters for the different members and all of the different connections that those members could have to representatives, custodians, guardians, so on. There's a lot of, or you might find yourselves managing many different addresses. I know from my time as a services consultant on these projects, Some of the situations called for adding custodians information to a letter so that the letter went out to that custodian, and we had indicators telling us so. Ultimately, I think one of my projects included upwards of 4 or 5 different addresses that we needed to manage or maintain or consider to put on a letter. So how do we select the correct address? Well, it starts with getting that address information from a member lookup and putting it on a case, putting that on our case, excuse me. And then through the information that we have on the case, we know we need to apply that address block to our letter. And making sure that we're prepared for any situation, whether it's a member's address provider, rep, and reps being the custodian, guardians, or beneficiaries. Or beneficiaries on top of any of those. So having some sort of environment or a user interface that contains all that information, and then knowing when to use it is, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. We'll talk about the logic behind this a little bit more, but containing all that information on the case and making sure we have it available at the right time is what we're trying to achieve with a lot of these letter creation scenarios here. Dan, do you speak Spanish?
I do not.
Well, that's why we can use templates to have an already translated Spanish letter and use it as like any other letter template that we have in the system, and take the values that we have in our case and apply it to that letter. So if you need to produce letters in other languages, all you have to do, create the template, translate it, set the placeholders as it would be on the on your native speaking template. Perhaps there might be different locations you might need to consider based on where verbs, objects lie in the sentence structure there. And then make sure you're storing on the case the member's preferred language so that we know at that time, at the moments that we need to produce a letter, we can consult that value, produce the right letter in the right language, and then you're only relying on someone to review the information that's on the letter and making sure that those small placeholders for all the values that we have are translated correctly if they need to be. And bonus points for anyone wondering or thinking about what languages are on the left. These are all, as Google Translate would tell me, these are all translatable to letters or mail or sending. And in case you're wondering what each one of those are, here they are on the screen now. I'm sure everyone didn't expect a quiz to be in the middle of the presentation, but I had to throw it in there. So the language concept, what I was mentioning there was using logic to consult the case and make sure that we're using the right language. Also logic around the right address based on what situation we find ourselves in, who's connected to this member, making sure we use that right address. And part of that all wraps into this idea that we're using the right template at the right time. So if you're doing this manually, you might be challenged with wondering when is a letter required based on where you are with the case. How do you prioritize which letter should go out before another? And then, of course, which template are you to select? And risks being time is always a risk, incorrect letter templates being a risk. And then how do you manage a to-do list if it is not being managed by a system for you? So I'm turning over again to Dan to explain this point.
Yeah, so as Ian mentioned, the case attributes highlighted in green here drive the logic within the case. So users don't have to go out and make decisions on what letter to pick at what time. We know based on where we're at within the workflow at this time, which activities highlighted in green there need to be worked by the analyst at this point. So as they choose those different activities, you could see the different types of documents here that will potentially display within that activities button, depending on where we are within that case. And, you know, if it's February, maybe Valentine's Day card maybe we should send it out early. I don't know, January.
we gave you very favorable terms. It looks like it's not due until June, so lots of time.
It might be late, but yeah, so the activities definitely show up. Once we choose the activity, we can either generate or not generate the letter. It's as soon as we click generate, it'll date timestamp within the activity there, but also bring up the letter template where we can, again, verify that all the correct data from the case was placed in there. If there's any other additional detail we need to add to this letter that was generated, we could add at this point and then click accept or to move on.
Yeah. So depending on the situation the case is in, and we have the information we need after intake to know, is this a situation where we need an AOR sent out or a WOL? Creating a letter for those, creating carbon copies for those. In fact, the carbon copy situation, if you find, when that comes up in our process flow here, after the initial letter is created, if the system is looking at who submitted this, does a carbon copy need to be produced, and it prompts the user to create one right then and there. So all of these different situations, the template's chosen for you, and we can make sure that logic is built in. Because as we've been pointing out, what does the case tell us? Whether it's a CC situation, which member, which language the member prefers, the type of case, who the submitter is, to make sure we get those AORs, those WLs sent out. Type of case would affect, which letters we are getting, and then key dates so that we know we're getting letters out, or we put dates behind them, due dates, in case it's an expedite situation, and you only have 3 days to complete it. Well, we're not going to give 5 days on a letter. We'll make sure that it's something that needs to get sent out within a few hours, likely. So when you're sorting your work, you see all these to-dos to complete, what has to be a priority. And then, of course, based on a decision, a denial would cause a level 2 appeal letter to be produced, same as a partial overturn versus an overturn, which would mean a different letter type altogether. So using these data points and many others to drive which activity shows up, which to-do item, and then which template to produce once the user clicks on that generate letter action. So hopefully at this point you are getting the idea of where these templates fit in, how the logic comes into play to choose information that goes on the template, which template it should be in the first place. So we have our letters. We have on top of those letters all the other documents that are part of a case's life, the additional information requested, medical records, any sort of evidence that proves the member's point in the case. And when things do get denied or partially overturned only, and there is a second level appeal that you may find yourselves having to submit to externally, well, we need to bring all this information together. So our last point here is to talk about collating or bringing together documents for document packets. If you're doing this manually today, I could only imagine the type of situation you find yourselves in, trying to grab or look through directories for documents, looking in folders, scanning them in to create. Sometimes what you need is one document to submit to these IROs, and knowing that you have to include things that are critical to the decision that you made. So you're running the risk of, if you're doing this manually, in my mind, failing to include the item that might convince the IRE or IRO to side in your favor, or to decide in your favor, excuse me. So it's definitely a concern about getting this information to the IRO in a good IRO or IRE in a short amount of time, but then also making sure you include all the critical pieces of information. So I'll turn it back over to Dan one last time to explain this part of the process.
Thank you. Yes, so what you see on the screen now is the level 2 case indicated by the yellow header there. It was automatically generated. You didn't have to create a new case. It's automatically generated and related back to the level 1 case. But once we're in the level 2, we create and fill out the case summary and any of the chronology of care items. Once that is filled out, we can then essentially take those data elements and turn them into documents that we can then line up with the other documents that are already on that level 1 case to generate that packet. So right there in the middle of our case screen, we have the documents that we're going to use on that level 1 to pull into a packet. From here, once we choose generate packet, we're brought to a screen where we can review all the items it brought in. We could rearrange pages, we could add pages as indicated on the screen. We could look up by member ID. We can continue if there's additional maybe HIM documents that they need to review. We could add those in at this point to that packet. Once they brought in, then we just generate packet. It creates a single PDF document of all of those individual items. So those individual items are still stored within the solution on the back end. You can retrieve those one by one, but now we have a full packet that we can send to the IRE or IRO, depending on the solution.
So how does this fit into our scenario when we're trying to submit and collect and submit all this information? Well, we're obviously avoiding the need to look, pick and choose for all the right documents. Not that you couldn't go out and, as some of those slides showed you, and look for other documents that are within the system, but you likely have a folder template, if you will, of what all should be in this packet that you're sending out to the IRE and IRO or IRO. And so that way we know we're getting all of the critical information. If some of the portals that we've seen, you only they are requiring that you condense or bring together all these documents into one document file anyway. So you have one item to attach, and that's what our system is giving you. That's why our system is collating all these documents together into one. And also we're storing that within our system too, so it's something you can easily retrieve at a later date. And then of course, well, maybe not of course, but a side benefit to this is if you are in the situation of collating these packets and you're having to pay for elevated Adobe licenses to complete that for each of the users that have to do this, well, now you can cheat a little bit and only apply those elevated licenses to OnBase, to the system, and then users are left just working with a free version of Acrobat for PDFs. And what do we do with this packet? So on top of saving it in the system, a small bonus feature I want to show off here is automating the packet submission. And this is using a function that is gaining, I think, in popularity on the business side, but using a bot to complete this. And these are good bots, not ones that'll buy up concert tickets or toys during the holidays, although I'm sure they could be used for that if someone was evil. And so I'm going to just quickly show a video of this bot in action. And what you're going to see is us logging in, or the bot, I should say, logging into an IRO portal. And although it's just a text file that we're bringing in here, that would be the PDF file that we are bringing together all those documents for within our system. And we're taking all the data points that are on the case. If there are particular ones for the portals that you're working with, then we include those fields on the case in our solution, making sure that at the right point they're required if necessary, so that this bot can take advantage of the data and the documents that are in our system to apply all the information to this IREs or IROs submission portal. And so this is actually a proof of concept that we did create using this technology. And I can imagine it's not just a one and done step here. I know that there are then lookups for status updates, and we do have a proof of concept of that working too. I don't have that video to show you today, but it operates very similar to this, logging into the portal, looking up a status, and even reporting back on that status on the case if necessary. So these processes, there's robotic processes, can be tied to timers or at certain points in the process when you're working on a case, so that when all these things are done, the next step is simply to initiate the bot to complete the submission, and then on a timer basis, looking up to see if there's a status update. So,
And we have success.
Yeah, it succeeds every time with this video. It's great. So hopefully that seals or puts together the story with a bow on top. Creating all the documents, creating all the letters, collecting everything, making sure that we're producing the right letter at the right time, of course, in the right format, with the right letterhead, in the correct language. And if it needs to go to a level 2 and you're submitting that information, creating a packet out of it, and perhaps employing a bot to complete that submission. So that was the presentation. I hope it was short and sweet enough for everybody and you got quite a bit out of it, but it was a pleasure to talk to everyone. I think we're now, if I'm not mistaken, on to the Q&A phase. So Jenny, Julie, excuse me, did anything come through by chance?
There were a couple questions. One was around the logic and the letter templates. I think they were concerned that there's a lot to managing it. How do you manage situations where there are too many templates?
Got it, yeah.
Is there a situation where there's too many templates, especially if we're going to start sending birthday and Valentine's Day cards?
Yeah, Dan wouldn't, always forget. Yes, yeah. I can think of at least one of my projects going this way, and what we ended up having to do, because it just seemed like it was going to be better managed this way for certain letter types, is still allow users to pick and choose a letter when prompted. What we were able to do, at the very least here, is for letters that were fairly straightforward and the likelihood of them changing was next to none. And I'm thinking of dismissal letters, out of compliance letters, acknowledgement letters, because those were really straightforward. The logic to automatically choose that letter type stayed in the solution. But certain things that were a little particular, where it did require a lot of different templates to achieve, we simply prompted the user to still create the letter, but then presented them with the list of templates to then produce a letter from, instead of having the system contain all of the logic to do so. So there have been situations where we come to an agreement on what's the best approach here, based on how many items that we're working with.
And when you're going through an implementation, it's always a good time to review your letters too. So you're going to be creating new templates, might as well review and see if you can consolidate at that time as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
What if, then this is just based off of that last comment, and it's my question here around, what you set the letters up, you get the templates in. Can you edit the generated letter, or is that a fixed document?
No, you can definitely edit it. If you couldn't tell from the screenshot, it actually opens it within Microsoft Word. So you can go in and edit. You can also lock it down. So it's all based on user groups and rights.
There was one more question around letter generation, which is good since that's the topic of today's webinar. What if we have a letter generation tool and we intend to keep it? Is this something that integrates with that?
Yes, it certainly can. Depending on what the tools that you're working with. I know a recent customer that we're talking to is working in an EMR application, and they actually have all their letters contained within there, and certainly all the data. So it makes sense. They already built these letters. Clearly, this is something you want to take seriously. So if you put the effort in already in another application, I understand why you'd want to keep the letter generation out of that application. So what we're doing with our cases is, if there is an API perhaps we could tie into to generate that letter, that's one option that we have. So based on the activity or to-do item that comes up, you have this letter to produce. If we can trigger that action through an API, then we can go and try that route. At a baseline, it's simply prompting the user to confirm that they've done the letter generation action within the other application, and probably sealing the deal by bringing that actual letter in to our solution, so that it's it's the proof of that action being completed, and you can probably see the downstream effect. We have it ready for collating and creating a document packet from if we get to that point in the process.
Very cool. We did have one last question. How would this work if we already use a print vendor? I'm assuming that's like a third-party relationship.
Yeah, a couple of our customers do have separate print vendors, and the simple and, I mean, probably straightforward here, but the letter gets produced, and what we'd include as part of that production, or the confirmation of that letter being produced, is converted to a PDF and submit to that third-party vendor. However that submission is completed today, I'm sure it's probably in a batch type of format, but saving that PDF to whichever method you're using to share with that third party.
Most of I've seen is secure FTP. So just sending it and uploading it to that vendor.
Yeah.
Right.
Pretty straightforward.
I think that was the last question. I didn't see any others come in. So that does bring us to the end of today's session. I thank both Ian Waiton and Dan Smith for sharing their insight with us. I didn't know when the pneumatic nail hammer was invented, so leaving with even more education today. Please watch your email, folks. We will be sending a link to today's webinar recording, as well as some information about CarryWorks A&G solutions. You're also welcome to look at the handout tab on your menu and take a look at those as well. On behalf of CarryWorks, I do thank each of you for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day.